The day was supposed to be about our daughter, Ella, in her cap and gown, glowing with pride as she walked across that graduation stage. Years of sacrifice, late nights, school lunches, tutoring, scraped knees, college applications, all leading to this moment. The crowd was on their feet. Flashbulbs lit the auditorium. The principal handed her the diploma, and she beamed. I had tears in my eyes, not from sadness, from joy, from knowing she made it. We made it. But as the applause faded and Ella stepped into the crowd of graduates, my husband Mark leaned over and whispered in my ear, his voice flat, emotionless. "I'm ending this. I've filed for divorce. I wanted you to hear it from me. Today, right there, at our daughter's graduation, like it was a business memo, like I was an afterthought." He expected me to break, to scream, to cry. He wanted to ruin the day and look like the calm, rational one. But I didn't flinch. I turned to him, met his eyes, and smiled. A slow, quiet smile. "Then I hope you're ready," I whispered back, "because I've been preparing for this longer than you think." He blinked, and in that split second, I saw it. Doubt. The first crack in his confidence. What would you do if the person you loved tried to blindside you in public, only to discover they'd walked straight into your plan? Keep watching. He wasn't ready for what came next. Mark and I met when we were both in our 20s, young, hopeful, and full of plans. He was the confident one, the charmer in a crisp white shirt and a cheap tie that he wore like it was custom tailored. I was quieter, more grounded, a teacher with a heart full of books and dreams of a small, happy family. We balanced each other, or at least that's what I thought. We got married after a year of dating, moved into a modest house, built a life, and when I gave birth to our daughter Ella, everything else faded into the background. I quit my job to stay home with her, thinking it was temporary. Mark supported the idea. "You're doing the most important job of all," he used to say. I believed him. At first, life was warm, slow weekends, spaghetti dinners. Mark would bring flowers every now and then, and Ella would scribble on the kitchen walls with markers while I made breakfast. We weren't rich, but we were content. Or at least, I was. Then came his promotions. Suddenly, Mark was flying out more, working later, upgrading everything. New car, new clothes, a new watch that cost more than our wedding. I was happy for him until I realized he wasn't taking me with him. Not really. He began referring to me as the home base. Said it jokingly at first, then more often, then to other people, then in front of Ella. My world narrowed as his expanded. I went from being his partner to being his shadow. Conversations grew short. Date nights disappeared. And when we did go out, he spent more time on his phone than looking at me. I'd ask him if something was wrong. He'd shrug. "You're imagining things. You're always so emotional lately." So I stopped asking. Ella became my anchor, my everything. I poured all of myself into raising her, volunteering at school, helping her with essays, teaching her to stand up for herself. I told her she could be anything, do anything, even when I didn't feel that way about myself anymore. Because somewhere along the line, I stopped recognizing the woman in the mirror. She looked tired, small, muted, and then one day, I found the receipt. It was tucked into the back pocket of his jeans in the laundry basket. 2 nights at a 5-star hotel. Champagne room service. For 2. The date? It was the weekend he told me he was at a work retreat. My hands shook as I stared at it. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wasn't ready to scream. I was ready to listen, to observe, to document. I quietly began taking inventory of everything. Passwords, bank records, the steady transfer of funds from our joint account to a business account I never knew existed. The way he'd started gaslighting me more aggressively every time I questioned anything. "You wouldn't understand. This is just how business works. I'm tired of being treated like the bad guy all the time." Except I hadn't said anything. He was preparing for something. I could feel it. That's when I hired Claire. She was a friend of a friend. a divorce attorney who specialized in complex financial cases, and more importantly, in handling men who thought they were invincible. I told her everything. We began preparing, quietly. She advised me to be calm, to keep smiling. He wants you emotional. He wants you sloppy. Don't give him that. So I kept playing the role, loving wife, supportive mother, while I was building a case behind the curtain. And that's when I discovered the real betrayal. The house we lived in, it had been refinanced in his name only. The retirement savings we'd built together, he'd started transferring portions into a shell LLC he set up 2 states away. He wasn't just preparing to leave me, he was preparing to erase me. No trail, no assets, no home, no history. Just a signature from a woman too shocked to fight back. But I wasn't that woman anymore. The day before Ella's graduation, Claire and I finalized everything. The financial reports, the evidence of infidelity, the revised will he didn't know I'd updated, and the email set to go out the moment he played his hand. Because I knew him. I knew Mark couldn't help himself. He needed to feel powerful. He'd want to make a scene. He'd choose the most public moment to shatter the illusion and walk away as the calm, collected man who tried his best. And he did, right on schedule. He whispered that it was over, and I whispered back, "Then I hope you're ready, because I wasn't the one being blindsided." He was walking straight into a spotlight I'd carefully positioned, and what came next would strip away everything he thought he could hide. Mark didn't make a scene right away. He thought he was being clever, quietly planting the knife between my ribs and walking away with clean hands. After whispering the news of our ending at the graduation ceremony, he slipped back into the crowd, putting on that same polished smile he always used for family photos and company parties. He posed beside Ella for pictures. He clapped politely when her name was called. To anyone watching, we were still the happy family. But inside me, something had finally snapped back into place. Not broken, aligned. I walked through the rest of the ceremony like I was moving through water, every step deliberate, every breath measured. Mark didn't know that while he was shaking hands and handing out fake congratulations. I was mentally counting down the minutes. At 3:45 p.m., right as we gathered outside for group photos, I stepped aside, pulled out my phone, and hit send. The email had been drafted days ago. Subject line, "To whom it may concern, the truth behind the celebration." Recipients, Mark's parents, his sister, his boss, his business partner, and a select group of family friends. Attachments, screenshots of the hotel bookings, the receipts, the shell company filings, the financial transfers he thought I didn't know about, and one very clear, very high-resolution photo of him and his business associate kissing outside that expensive resort. Within 10 minutes, the energy around Mark shifted. People started pulling out their phones. His mother's smile dropped. His sister took a sharp breath and whispered something behind a hand. One of his colleagues took a call and stepped away, visibly angry. Mark's face turned pale. He was still smiling, but his eyes kept darting around. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know what yet. Then his phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again. He checked it, froze, then looked directly at me, and I smiled. Small, controlled, not cruel, but victorious. That night, he tried to corner me at home. He slammed the door behind him. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, his voice shaking, not with guilt, but with fear. I sat calmly on the couch, sipping tea. "Oh, I thought you wanted things to be over," I said. "I'm just helping you accelerate the process." He ranted for 20 minutes, accused me of invading his privacy, said I was making a scene, destroying his reputation, dragging our family through the mud. I let him talk. Then I handed him an envelope. Inside was a copy of the financial records, the list of transfers, the corporate filings I'd pulled, and a copy of the amended divorce response I'd submitted that morning through my lawyer. He flipped through it. His face went red. "You've been planning this?" "Of course I have," I replied. What kind of wife would I be if I didn't pay attention when the man I married tried to erase me from his future? He went quiet after that. The next few weeks were a storm, mostly for him. His boss called him in. There was an internal review at his firm. That business associate he'd been seeing? She blocked him on everything after the scandal broke. Apparently. She didn't sign up for public disgrace. Meanwhile, I moved in silence. Claire, my lawyer, filed motions to freeze our joint assets. We submitted evidence of financial misconduct, marital fraud, and deceptive transfers. Mark had thought he could take everything. Instead, he was being investigated for misappropriation of funds. The house? I had proof I'd contributed to every mortgage payment, every renovation, and more importantly, I had Ella, because in the chaos of his betrayal, he forgot the one person watching the closest. Ella came to me one night, quiet and unsure. "Is it true?" she asked. I didn't lie. I told her gently, but truthfully, about what her father had done. She didn't cry. She nodded. Then she said, "You don't have to explain. Mom, I saw the way he started treating you. I just didn't have the words for it. It broke my heart, and it healed it at the same time, because for so long, I'd stayed for her. And now, I realized she was never the reason to stay. She was the reason to leave with my head high." Mark tried to salvage things. He sent a few half-hearted apologies, claimed he was confused, under stress, caught up in something bigger than himself. But it was too late. The man who tried to humiliate me at our daughter's graduation had unknowingly triggered his own undoing at the very event meant to celebrate the future. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I simply let the truth speak for me. And the truth? Mark thought he had control until the world saw who he really was. But the real twist? He hadn't even seen the final move I had left. The real turning point didn't come in a courtroom or through a lawyer's letter. It came in a conference room with polished glass walls, silent judgment, and a round table full of men in gray suits. See, what Mark didn't realize was that I hadn't just exposed him to family and friends. I'd quietly sent a copy of everything, his fraudulent transfers, misuse of company cards, the suspicious Shell LLCs, to the ethics board at his firm. And unlike me, they weren't sentimental. The firm specialized in corporate architecture, and Mark had recently been promoted to a partner track position. He'd been handling millions of dollars in development contracts, government bids, and public infrastructure projects. So when they saw that he'd been siphoning money into private accounts under the guise of consulting fees and non-billable expenses, it wasn't just a scandal. It was grounds for immediate dismissal and investigation. I found out about the meeting from a friend of Ella's godfather, who worked in the same company. He called me and said, "Whatever you gave them, it's not just personal anymore. He's being reviewed for financial misconduct." 2 days later, Mark came home looking hollow, suit wrinkled, tie half loosened, face drawn tight like a man walking through the ruins of his own ambition. "They're suspending me," he mumbled. I simply nodded. "No worries. That leaves you more time to focus on the divorce." He stared at me. "What do you want from me?" I put my tea down and looked him in the eye. "Nothing," I said. "I already took what mattered. Your silence. Your narrative. The story you thought you'd get to tell about us. I rewrote it. And now, you're just a footnote." The legal proceedings moved quickly after that. Mark's lawyers tried to fight back, filed objections, asked for delays, tried to claim that the money he moved had nothing to do with our marital assets. But my lawyer was ready. We had the receipts, the transaction logs, the timestamps, every consulting transfer he made during our marriage, traced and documented. What truly cornered him, though, was the prenup addendum. Yes, the one he had insisted we sign after Ella was born, when his career first took off. It was full of self-serving clauses, but one of them, ironically, worked against him. Any financial misconduct or extramarital breach nullifies property protection. He had put that in to protect himself from imaginary gold digging. But now, it gave me legal claim to every shared asset, including our primary home, retirement funds, and a portion of his stock options. The irony was delicious, but the twist that truly unraveled him wasn't legal or financial. It was emotional. It was Ella. At our mediation hearing, she asked to speak. She wasn't a child anymore, legally or emotionally. She stood there, strong and poised, and looked straight at her father. "I watched you treat Mom like she was disposable," she said. "You used her loyalty like a doormat. And then you thought you could erase her and still keep me." Mark looked like he'd been slapped. Ella continued, "I don't want to be part of your curated image. I want to be part of truth. And right now, that means I choose Mom." He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. And in that silence, I saw something rare. Collapse. Not just of a man, but of his illusions, of the story he built about who he was, how powerful he'd become, how easily he could discard what no longer served him. The final settlement granted me sole ownership of our home, 70% of our joint financial assets, reimbursement for legal costs, monthly spousal support until I re-entered full-time employment, though I'd already decided I wouldn't need it for long. Most importantly, my dignity, returned and reinforced by the truth. Mark, on the other hand, walked away with a reputation in shambles, a job under review, and a daughter who no longer looked at him with admiration, but with clarity. The day the divorce finalized, I didn't celebrate. I simply made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, watched the light shift across the floor of my living room, and I exhaled, not because I won, but because I was done surviving and ready to start living. A month later, I received an offer to return to teaching, part-time at first, the same school where I once worked. Before I gave everything to a man who forgot how to value it, walking back into that classroom, smelling chalk and old books, hearing young voices full of possibility, it felt like reclaiming a part of me I hadn't realized was missing. I was no longer the wife, or the ex-wife. I was myself, fully and unapologetically. Some endings don't come with fireworks or dramatic music. Sometimes, they arrive quietly, like the way a storm passes while you sleep, and you wake up to a world scrubbed clean. The day my divorce was finalized, I didn't cry. I didn't pop champagne. I didn't rage or gloat or scream. I simply stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looked at the woman staring back at me, and whispered, "You made it." Not just through a broken marriage, not just through betrayal and humiliation, but through the quiet unraveling of a life you thought would last forever. And now, there was nothing left but space. Space to breathe, space to become. I spent the first few weeks doing simple things, cooking for myself, reading again, volunteering at the library, walking without looking at the clock. I painted the guest room. I threw out the bedsheets Mark liked, but I hated. I changed the lock on the front door, not out of fear, but finality. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, and not one of them asked, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" They simply said, "You look lighter." One evening, Ella and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Mom, I never saw you as weak, but now I see you as powerful." I didn't answer. I just held her hand. Because that's all I ever wanted, for her to know what strength really looked like. Not screaming, not revenge, but steady, strategic, self-respecting resilience. A few months later, Mark tried to reach out again. An email, just a few lines. "I know I handled things badly. I regret how it ended. I hope one day you can forgive me." I stared at it for a long time, and then I did something powerful. I didn't reply, because forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it just means closing the chapter with your head held high and your peace intact. And as for him, last I heard, he took a job in another state, smaller firm, lower pay. His reputation followed him like a shadow. He still tells people I overreacted, that I tried to destroy him. Let him. Because people who fear the truth will always rewrite the story in their favor. But the people who matter, they know. They saw the quiet way I rose, the steady way I moved, the dignity I never dropped, not even when I had every reason to. If you're watching this right now, and you've ever been made to feel small, if someone has tried to erase you from the life you helped build, if you've stayed silent out of fear, or shame, or because you just didn't know where to begin. Let me tell you something. You don't need to explode. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to get even. You just need to get free. And then you build something better, something that no one else owns, something that doesn't require approval or permission or apology. You unedited, uninterrupted, unbroken. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived through betrayal, or are still in the quiet ache of holding everything together while someone tries to tear it apart, share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone. If you know someone who's hiding their pain behind silence, send them this video. Let it be the start of something new for them. 2. And if you believe in truth, strength, and emotional justice, subscribe to this channel, because here, we tell stories that remind you your silence isn't weakness. Your strategy is strength. And your story? It's far from over. He thought he could break me by making a scene, but I didn't fight fire with fire. I fought it with facts, with clarity, with grace. And now, I wake up in a life that belongs to me. Quiet victory is still victory. And sometimes, it's the loudest thing in the room.